Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play set in the Eberron campaign world. It is Friday, so we are here with Khyber Shards Answers. It has been a hot minute since we have had a regular Khyber Shards Answers with a player, and it has been even longer since we had Colin on. We just checked, and it has been 2 months. It is before the entire adventure in the Ziggurat that we had Colin on Khyber Shards Answers, because March and April were madness.
I'm so glad those are behind us.
I am very happy to be here in May, looking down the barrel of finishing out the school year, because that's always calm.
I can only imagine.
So we only got one question for today. We're recording a little bit earlier than we usually do, so that's probably to do with that.
It's funny that you say that, because it's earlier in the week, but it's late at night.
That's true. And once again, it is you recording here in the evening after a consequential recording session of Khyber Shards.
I am so scared.
Well, you're the only one that I frequently record on Wednesday, on the night after we do the game.
I either have the earliest bedtime or I don't have a bedtime. It's one or the other.
Yep, that's exactly right. Woo! Food service.
Don't do it. Don't ever do it, y'all, if you don't have to.
So I think for me, the biggest consequential thing is in Pog's life. Obviously, we have Thora gives him the report about his dad, although that's kind of been overtaken by other events. Which, we're seeing at the end of the most recent episode. But narratively speaking, we have the return of Dane after a very tense exit for him, especially with him and Pog. Mm-hmm. We have this adventure alongside Demise, and then seeing Thora in this state of kind of giving up on doing things the way that she thought that she could do them. So this is interesting. I wonder, how is that for Pog, do you think? Because Pog always kind of agreed with Dane.
Yeah. It's deeply frustrating because Pog has believed in Aryan shade more than anything. But his first independent inkling was that Dane was right. And that desire to follow Dane off and to get to work. And then having been dissuaded from that, and now to see Thora, the only person who was in the forefront of this whole ideology, to be not only defeated but dejected by it is a really hard moment. And it's really hard to separate tonight from the question you're asking. This is a moment where Thora is not who Pog needed to believe that she was. If he was going to choose to live down this route that was not his conviction, she needed to be a person that he could force himself to follow. And she is I don't want to say revealing, because I don't think this is a universal truth. The player doesn't think this. But from Pog's perspective, she is showing herself to him to not be that person.
Yeah.
And Pog has done, it's weird to see. This is a good question for at the end of a session like we just had. This version of Pog, man, he's grown, huh? Like, we've seen this guy on a journey. And I think this might be, to a certain extent, which is ultimately inconsequential considering the substantial consequences at our door. I think this is kind of a breaking point for Pog of it's not made to follow. And I love the conversation that was had with Ari, which was one of true equality. And of disagreement that was done with love and respect and anger at the exact same time. And I think that's a great example of where the character has grown to, where all the characters have grown to, that could be had. But it's especially hard now that Dane has again left. Because we are ultimately, with Thora being the way she is right now, we're in a worse place than we started. So we've not only made no progress, we've actively slid back farther. You see all those comments on videos about this left this left race relations or this left feminism back 50 years. This is us. This aberrant marks are set back in Stormreach right now. And that's after doing things what he was told was the right way. I love that I've never gotten to explore it yet with Pog, but this is a real moment of having been right and surrendered. And he may not be the petty person that needs to hear that, but he knows it. And he trusts that it's also known that his dissent was worth hearing the first time. It's a challenging place.
I liked it, especially the context of Pog going back to the church, having the conversation with the flame. I really liked that scene because it's it's got to be very challenging because Pog's got all these ideas of heroism. And we kind of talked when we were creating Pog, that was a big part of who you intended Pog to be, was this idea that Pog had this notion of heroism and the desire to be the hero of a story, to be the person that there's a statue of in the little village one day because so and so stood up to the raving horde of trolls or whatever. And so we're getting these very different pictures of potential heroism that Pog is seeing, and the challenge of speaking to the flame, and the flame essentially saying, yes, this is the harder way to do things.
Yeah. And try as I might to avoid making Pog into what my own personal tastes are, it's been fun to see him naturally evolve towards the temptation to be knowing anti-hero.
Yeah.
As I sit here wearing a Gambit shirt, I'm always drawn to the begrudging heroes. And so that's why I chose the challenge of playing someone who was trying to be gloriously upright. But there's something complex, and I loved that conversation with the flame, because if Pog kills someone that's bad preemptively, then it feels to him like the consequences are only his.
Right.
But the positive benefit remains heroic, which I think is really the thesis of anti-heroism. He's willing to be the one. But it's been a really fun exploration as you've built out the Silver Flame. And it's very rewarding that, like a director in a play, you kind of guide to self-revelation more than you give answer. And for him to recognize that there is something that he's a part of that is bigger than anything in Stormreach. And that he's on the side of a principle. right now we're in some special circumstance where if Culsier shows up, I don't think there's anyone that's going to argue that he's right to try murdering as hard as he can.
Sure.
But his desire to just throw a fireball at Tommel while he's hanging, his not well hidden desire to re-murder Demise or more successfully do it. But he knows in the depths of who he is that there's righteousness as well as rightness at stake.
Yeah.
And that's a very fun line to play the internal battle of. It's a testament to your campaign because I wanted to play someone really simple and in all forms of the word. I wanted to play a simple person. Has not been that way.
So you and I have a podcast that we do together called I Never Got Into That. And
available
we did
everywhere podcasts are.
Available everywhere. And the premise, for those who don't know, is that Colin and I will pitch each other essentially a fandom or an author or a filmmaker or a series that the other one hasn't seen and has no experience of. And that one will absorb some of it and then we talk about it. And we did a episode on Discworld a while back. And we picked 3 books, and one of the books was one of the City Watch series. And I got really into that, and I've been listening to them since then when I have time. And in one of the main characters in that, from the first one, is a watchman named Carrot, who is kind of the Discworld version of Pog in my head, because he is very plain, very simple, and is very heroic, just naturally without necessarily seeking it out. There's a line in the 3rd of that series of Watchmen novels where one of the other Watchmen thinks of Carrot, "You've got to be very complex to be that simple."
That's delightful. Oh, that's so valid.
So it's just thinking of how Pog has developed. There's still the simplicity there, but it is definitely a growth of realizing that the world is big enough that Pog has to absorb more of it than he used to.
The world of Stormreach in particular is so very gray. That it's really hard to tell when you're on the side of light or dark, which is why the silver flame, it's just a beautiful analogy for the way this whole world has been through Pog's eyes. Is he's kind of right down the middle, and he doesn't really love that because he doesn't know if he stands for anything, and really, that makes it easier to go against your morals. It's been a very complicated ride. I really expected this to be a far simpler campaign, emotional investment wise.
No, I have really enjoyed the last couple of episodes because I like the idea, and I mean this happens occasionally in the X-Men, which has obviously been kind of our source inspiration. But I like the idea of Thora as the sort of Professor X stand-in. The idea of Professor X reaching a breaking point because you think about the episodic nature of X-Men, whether you're talking about the old series of the comics or whatever, and it is always the X-Men do something right and save the world, and someone says, "Oh boy, mutants are great," or something, like that. It's not usually that cheesy, but the Mutant Registration Act doesn't quite pass the Congress that day, that people decide not to support mutant genocide that day.
Right.
But like a week later, it's happening again.
Yeah. They pocket it. It just goes in the pocket. It'll come back.
And Xavier's, almost always still just, but we're just that much better. And next week we'll be just that much further along. And so Thora's not nearly as philosophical as Xavier. and so it felt appropriate that the realization that her idealistic notion would just was being taken advantage of would kind of send her back down the more cynical self that existed before she tried this. And I like the idea of, plus I also wanted it to be an opportunity. Having young player characters and having them have a strong mentor figure is dicey because it kind of leaves the direction of the campaign in the hands of the mentor in a lot of ways, or it can. Right. And so having Thora just give up on this kind of hands the reins over to you guys. And I do have to say, I was not quite prepared for the immediate plan to be, well, let's overthrow the Stormlords. And
I think you should have.
I'm a little disappointed that the trigger for Colseer is showing up, that I rolled that so early, because it would be interesting to see. And I mean, I don't know. We're only a couple of episodes have recorded past that. Maybe that's still the direction Ari's going to find a way to swing this. But I was a little bit sorry when I rolled the die and had to interrupt it. But I also couldn't ignore the die because I rolled it publicly, in that I rolled it on D&D Beyond, so you guys saw it. So here we are. But yes. No, this is obviously we can't talk about what we just recorded, but I'm excited to see where you guys go with a little more of the reins in your own hands.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's so satisfying about the natural decision of let's overthrow the Stormlords is Pog has always been on our side or against. Mm-hmm. Cool. Pick your side. Now Pog's down to be the enforcer of the consequences of picking your side. Like we didn't give.
This is the find out half of the phrase.
Exactly. The Strike Force and Grey Malkin have given no cause for anything other than the community to rally. Mm-hmm. So if you're not about that, like I understand the idea of like we should be better than they say we are. I don't know, man. How about we be exactly what they say we are?
Man, Pog saying let's be better later or something like that, or we'll be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was killer. The timing of that line was real. It was just snappy. It was good. It was good. It would be good writing if it had been written.
We were doing Aaron Sorkin at the time for Ingot.
Yes,
so
that's right.
I had to have an exit line ready.
So we have a question, and it has spawned in me a follow-up question just because I'm interested. This is from Emily, and Emily. It's a fun one. So, Colin, if Pog had died or been otherwise rendered unplayable during the Ziggurat adventure, and you had the choice of playing either Dane or Demise until Pog could be restored by the party, which one would you pick?
Dane.
Yeah?
Dane, yeah. And it's not because of my cliche despising Demise. Mm-hmm. It's because of what we just said. I would love... There is a part of me that has gained enough confidence as a player in your campaign to find my voice. And I think it would have been really fun to be the Dane that came back from the Ziggurat. To get to, and in Emily, in your particular circumstance, to get to hold Pog's axe while his corpse is draped on Thora's desk.
Yeah.
And explain, I knew this was coming. Mm-hmm. I told you this was coming. Boy, that could have been a scene, man. That would have been fun. But I also would have been very scared to do that because that's a character that you've put a lot of care into.
Mm-hmm.
And I would break him because that I'm drawn to breaking point moments right now.
Yeah.
and especially with a timid Professor X, Magneto would not be calm and sensitive. No. I love the way you played it, especially the way you played it in the extended. I think you played that beautifully and correct. Thanks. It's not how I would have played. Like sure. I wouldn't have had that much depth of thought to get there. That's your care for the characters. My Magneto would have pushed to the breaking.
Yeah.
You very much played a real Ian McKellen caring for Patrick Stewart as opposed to the character. Well,
and the circumstances of one of the Strike Force being dead would definitely have changed that scene, I think, for everyone involved, because it wouldn't just be Thora has found out bad news. It's also a job we set out to do. Well, I think honestly, that would have been the reason that would have been a fun scene is because if Dane had come back hot because one of the Strike Force were dead, Thora wouldn't have been timid. It would have been a screaming match because this was your, this was your job. This was the thing you were going to do. This was the mission you wanted to do. And you got one. And this is exactly what I said. That would have been a good scene.
It would have been a lot of fun.
That would have been a fun scene. We haven't.
That's why, Emily.
It's been a long time since we've gotten to like scream at each other in a in a scene.
We had a lot of fun doing so as well.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of trust that comes. Like I hope this reads what good friends we are. Yeah. That I really would enjoy exploring completely alien emotions with Philip in the context of role play. But I think that would have been very compelling. And I think Dane is a fun change to play someone who knows how to say what he has to say.
Yeah.
It's a really good question though.
As a side note, I have finally figured out how to build Dane mechanically.
Don't you say it.
Because I'm playing in a one shot that a friend is running, and I thought I really want to do the thing that Dane does. Like I don't necessarily want to play Dane, but I want that thing where I've got like the powered up fists that that is his combat style. And as a GM, I just have the freedom to just make that a rule in that character, but to try and find a way. You build a paladin and you get permission from the DM to use, there was a play test where they allowed unarmed fighting as a fighting style, like allowed fists as brawling as a fighting style. You do paladin, you get the GM to give you permission to use the brawling style as a fighting style, and then the smites are where you charge up the fists. You use the paladin smite ability to try that. So I'm excited. I get to do that in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
To actually trying out Dane on a character sheet, essentially.
Rad.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. So a follow-up question. Speaking of random character builds, and I haven't said this or given any lead up, so you may have no thoughts on this at all. Obviously, the big bad evil guy just showed up, at least manifested, and gave an ultimatum. So obviously, at least in some form, we are into Act 5. Like we are reaching the climax of this story
now, Tony.
That's right. And so, not yet knowing anything about what we will do after, which I don't really either yet, because we need to sit down and have a conversation about that probably.
Spoiler
at some point.
Alert: we're going to keep playing games together. One
we're
way or
going to
another.
keep playing D&D. Are there ideas? So my reality as a player is there are always like, oh, that would be fun to build. How would I build that? Going around in my head. Has that started to happen yet? Have you started to think, no, being smart enough about how narrative works to kind of see that we were reaching a climax?
Right.
Has that started to happen in you where you're thinking it would be cool to play this class or that class in another game?
A little bit. Getting back to Baldur's Gate 3 has returned that curiosity, but this is going to be a disappointing answer. It's really no. And the reason that I haven't put a lot of thought into it is the same reason that I never started rehearsing for the next character until I was done with the current show.
Yeah.
Because if I started too much building something out now, I would either build Pog into it, or I wouldn't focus on building a new character as much as making sure I built Pog out of it.
Yeah.
And so I need, no spoiler and not being melodramatic, I need Pog's story to end.
Sure.
Before I feel like I could do justice, because this is maybe overly self-confident. I'm so proud of what we've done in this story with these characters, that I don't know how to stop thinking about them when it comes to, I've got this weird little thing where when I close at my restaurant, my staff all know what they need to do. Front of house, back of house, bussers. And they know to come to me when they're ready for me to walk through the restaurant. I let them roll a D20. And we set, based on how good they were on their shift, we set what the DC is. And if they roll over it, then they're good to go when they think they are. And I trust them on their way out. And every time a dice rolls, I respond to them in Pog's voice. It's always some deep,
oh, that's good,
simple-minded. And so I don't have it in me to roll dice yet and not think Pog. Yeah. So I need his story to conclude before.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm a Pog player rather than a TTRPG player, really, in my mind. So
have you built Pog in Baldur's Gate?
I didn't. I built the opposite.
Oh yeah. What are you playing in Baldur's Gate?
Well, he's a. I've got my main is a ranger on my deepest campaign. Like it's HeroForge. I've just built like 7 characters that have all gotten off of the ship at the beginning. But it's a ranger that has a bear summon, which is very fun. Yeah, he's rad. That's awesome. He's awesome. And his name is Nilok, just because it's my name backwards, and that was supposed to be my wizard name in high school from those things. So yeah, he's the one who's currently doing all the hardest work.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Colin. And thank you all for watching and checking in with us. Hopefully, I know I've said this multiple times at this point, hopefully we can get back to something of a regular schedule with these, of having something for you on Fridays, at the very least, as we start to move into summer, although inevitably something will happen. I don't know. We'll see. But we will continue to put forward episodes, which is what you really care about. So that's what we're going for.
Fair.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so in links down below, where you will find all of the ways to get in touch with Discord and everything like that. You can, since we mentioned it, you can hear me and Colin talking about various forms of media on the I Never Got Into That podcast, which you can find on all of your podcasting apps. And you can occasionally see Colin over on Twitch at Sorry BTR. The O is a 0. But for now, new episodes of Khyber Shards will be out on Monday and new Khyber Shards Answers on Friday. And until then, thanks for rolling with us.